Alright guys, on this one I'm going to show you skinning out a raccoon. So if you take a look here, I have a large male. Let's see, I'll turn it around. A large male here. We've already dispatched him. And so I went ahead and used my chopping block, cut off the front paws. I'm not going to use that part of the fur, and it's not necessary for hanging him out on the gambrel. So the only thing I need is on the back paws. So I'm going to use a Mora. It's worked perfect for skinning out animals. The only challenge I have on this one is my tip broke, but that was my fault, or my wife's fault actually. She was using this pry bar, but not necessarily pry bar, so the tip broke on it, but no big deal. It'll work perfect for what I need. So just like on the rabbit, you go at the base of the paw of the raccoon's foot and go all the way around the ankle. Be careful when you're cutting on the back side, because on the back side you have that tendon that you want to be able to hang the animal up with, same as deer and everything else. So just slowly work your way around that back paw. Until you can get that fur, for the most part, released all the way around. Alright, then do the other one. Then we'll make what is called the money cut, which is the cut that goes from the ankle all the way across between his genitals and the vent, and all the way up to the back side. Okay, so we will work on making that cut now, and be careful with that tendon back there. You want to try to preserve that for hanging him out. This is where the point will come in handy on this Mora. Alright guys, so in the process of trying to show you how I pull back the skin and all that on the back legs, the camera died. So I've got it readjusted, got it set up. I took a couple pictures to show you how I stick the stick through that tendon I was pointing out to you, as well as the back quarters being pulled out. So what we're going to finish doing is coming along this back money cut through the vent like I was telling you about. At this point you should be able to, for the most part, put your knife in and just force it through where that vent is. And if you have a pretty decent sharp knife, it shouldn't be too big of an issue. Again, the raccoon does have a lot of fat on it, so it's going to be a little more challenging than say a farm-raised rabbit or something of that nature, which I had done in previous videos. Most processing of animals is quite similar, really. Outside of size, the cuts, if you're going to preserve the hide, are fairly similar, as well as the field dressing and all that. So I'm going to keep pulling the hide as I go. You want to try to keep from getting meat on the skin side. Just makes it easier in the flushing, but if you get some on there, it's not a huge ordeal. And you just got to clean that up when you're flushing. So my money cut here is being a little bit of a pain. There's a lot of fat right here. You want to be careful when you're doing this because you don't want to cut yourself or any of those vital organs. You have the bladder is pretty close, and the anus. If you get the urine in the meat or any of the feces, you'll taint the meat. So just stuff to be mindful of when you're working in this area. There we go. Now I'm getting to this extra fat area. And a lot of times once you get to here, you can kind of work your finger through that center section so it's easier to put your knife in and make that final cut straight up. Alright, there we go. So, got that final cut done. So now what I'm going to do is grab a hold of the hide on both sides of the legs and just pull. Because this is a fresh kill and he's still warm, it's going to be a lot easier. So keep that in mind. If it's something that is not a fresh kill and the carcass has had time to cool, sometimes this hide's a little harder to pull off. And sometimes due to the fat content, you may have to trim a little. Also remember, early America, they would save a lot of this fat, and you could make candles, grease lamps, oil lamps, things like that for that as well. Alright, so being as he is a male, part of this is his male parts, so you want to be careful right there as well. And that's why there's excess fat in this area. So we got that done. Pull around here. Something also you can do with your farm raised animals as well as wild, if you've trapped them, is that you can, if you keep the animal alive in a secure cage overnight and not give them much food, water for one day to help empty out the bladder and the large intestine, it makes it a little easier, less risk on tainting the meat because they've had plenty of time to empty their bowels. Something else to be mindful of. Alright, so when I get in the back here, if you can see my fingers on each side, so I try to just shove my fingers through that back spine area, and you can pull it up a little bit to loosen some of the tail, and then again back down to just make it a little bit easier. And you're going to have a lot of fat right there. So again, right here we're getting to the tail. You're going to have a lot of fat. And you also have the anus right there. So in the process of trimming around this, trim the fur. This is what works for me. I trim the fur around the edge of the anus so that when I pull it back out from the other side, it's not so difficult. Hopefully you guys are able to see this well. Alright, the other thing you can do when you're getting these and you're wanting to save their tail, if you can split it out, you'll have better success in saving it. And the rounded part of the blade, right there where it curves, is usually the sharpest. So if you take it, pull it to where it is nice and tight and semi-centered, run you a nice solid cut and use that tailbone as your brace for your blade. And just pick a spot and split it out a couple inches. And you have to eventually split this tail out anyway. So just keep that in mind while you're doing this. So if you can brace your hand against the hindquarters and grab that area where you've already shoved your fingers through and pull on the tail. A lot of times you can get it pretty good. This one's got some stubborn fat, so I'm going to make a couple cuts just at the base of the tail. Be careful not to be getting the hide, because you want to preserve it. This is just so that I'm, right there, I'm collecting some of the fat, extra fat on the hide. Alright, so you see we already got tailbone starting to show right there at the base of the tail. So I'm going to keep trying to split this out so I have better success in keeping my whole tail. What I have found in the process of doing raccoons, you get too aggressive too fast and you end up ripping off about half of the tail, ends up staying stuck to the tailbone. And you don't want that. Part of the pretty part of the hide is this unique pattern on the tail. So I'm just taking a couple inches, taking the round part of my blade, scoring it basically, and then bracing the hide and pulling. I've heard they have tools for this, but just take your time, you can make it look good. And you have to split it out anyway when you salt it if you're going to try to preserve the fur onto the tail. See what I mean? I just lost part of, let's see, we got 4 rings right there stuck on the tail. I still got a good portion of the tail, but I end up losing the end of it in the process. So it happens. So now we're just going to keep pulling this hide down. I'm going to adjust the camera so you guys can see a little better. Just grab that hide, keep pulling it down. Oh, my tendon ripped on me. So I keep a rope around for this very reason. And then I'll just tie his foot off real quick. Sometimes those tendons rip. They're not, depending on how tight those hides are toward the head based on fat, it grips it pretty well. So I'm going to just attach his foot using a rope to my homemade gambrel here, and I just go around it a couple times, and then I just tie it off with a simple overhand. Sometimes I don't even tie it. I think there we go. So you should be good. Alright, so you need to use the knife. Don't be afraid to work around some of this back fat. Yeah, this guy's got a lot of back fat, so I'm just going to work the hide around it. I'm getting kind of close to the front arms, so some of that is kind of normal. When you get to the place that you can pull the arms through, feel free to do that. And I'm just looking at the point where the hide and the fat come together, grabbing the hide and pulling it tight, just taking my blade and running it around. Got a decent sharp knife. These Moras are perfect. You can do that quite easily. So here we're getting to this front arm. You can pull that hide down and work his arm out. Make everything a little easier for you. That membrane likes to get stuck, so there we go. Now if we can get the other one. If you guys got a good tip on how to get that tail out without splitting it, I'd love to hear it. Some of you guys probably been skinning animals more longer than me, so I'll definitely take some good advice. So in this case, because I plan on making a cap out of this, I don't particularly need the mask. So I'm not so worried about that. Getting to the base of the ears, I believe. So I'm going to try to give it a tug right here, get some of that fur that's up there by the front part of the neck. There we go. Hold on to it nice and tight. A few cuts where that hide is. Obviously, there's a little blood involved in this process. So then what I do, I find where that hide is when I'm done, and I just cut all the way through it. Which he's wanting to just keep on coming, so might end up with some ears on this guy. All the way through. Alright, and then I save the hide just like that. I have a Walmart bag. I'll just stuff it down in the Walmart bag, tie it off and freeze it till I'm ready to tan the hide. So then, when it comes to field dressing the animal, I take another Walmart bag. Let me find what I have here. Well, might not have brought another one down here with me. Any old used grocery bag, these are perfect for this. So I lay that down on the ground, come back here to the front, right where the penis area was, make a little bit of an incision. You gotta be extra careful here, because that's right where the bladder is. Okay? You don't want to hit that bladder and taint your meat. So if you get that section opened up, follow it around with your finger. I'm going to go ahead and change gloves. I like to keep gloves on just because it's just easier for me to work with, keep my hands clean. Alright, so take your finger, follow that around. Some of that meat you're going to want to save. That side rib meat. So just be careful at what you're doing. Alright, so made an incision in there to get some of this opened up. Here is the bladder. This is well empty. Just make a quick incision at the top, pinch it off. Make sure you pinch that thing. So by pinching it, you don't let any of the urine get down into the meat. And then you throw that bladder out the way. You don't want the urine to taint the meat. The other thing is, when you come up here back to the top, cut around the anus itself. Okay? Now make sure not to get none of that nasty in there. Just get that area detached from the rest of the animal. It's pretty much just fat. Okay, then come back through here on the other side. Take my fingers in like this. I don't know how well you guys can see that. On a V, I come right down the center. You can even put your knife out blade toward you. That way you don't risk cutting anything else open. Okay? Then at this point, we're left with the whole large intestine here, and keep working around that anus area, and you're careful. You can typically pull it all the way through without having to break that bone. Now I've been told, and this may just be, you know, how different people do things, that if you break the bones, it releases a chemical that tends to make the meat much more gamey. I don't know how true that is, but I've always done deer this way, so I tend to do other animals the same way too. You know, some of these guys you'll see on there that'll try to whip through this thing as fast as they can and make a fun competition out of it. That's all fun and everything, but you don't want to mess around when it comes to your meat, at least in my opinion. Alright, so got a clean cut all the way through. Don't know how well you guys can see that. Let's see here, let me adjust the camera. There you go, all the way through. Alright. So now, you just take that's already open. You got kidneys and everything else in here. Just take your knife, trim everything up. Anything you can go ahead and grab and pull out. I try to get it all out in one swoop. Sometimes that works, sometimes it don't. So now I'm getting down to where the diaphragm is. You know that diaphragm, because it's a really tough muscle there. It's the one that causes your lungs to, your chest to expand and contrast when your lungs are filling with air. Alright, so it's a little hard to show you all this process in video, but hopefully you're seeing I'm just taking my knife, going around, trimming out that diaphragm and getting all the entrails. And I stick my hand down there, that doesn't bother me. And I just try to get everything out of it. I don't tend to keep the diaphragm. It's a pretty tough muscle to try to eat, in my opinion, because of how hard it works. So I'm trimming that membrane that attaches the lungs and the heart and the esophagus all in there together, pulling all that out, and you will have to cut the esophagus. That one doesn't come so easily when it comes to just pulling. Alright, so now we've gotten all that out. Trim out the rest of that diaphragm. We got it all in one swoop. Throw that in a bag that you put under your carcass. Alright, so now really the only thing I have left to do is cut off the hind legs, the head, and the tail, and it's ready to quarter out. So I'm going to go over to the chopping block and get that taken care of. So it wasn't a ridiculously long process. Just you know, take your time and do it right. It's not something you got to rush through. Not something that's got to be knocked out in a few seconds. When you do things like that, you end up getting a little careless. So hopefully this helps some folks. If you got some good tips, especially on how to save all of the tail. I tried splitting it out, but this is about the third or fourth one that I know of that I've end up stuck with the rest of the tail on the end. I definitely would appreciate tips on that. So hopefully this helped you guys. Thanks for watching. God bless.